What is life really like in a place like this? At 15,000 feet, survival isn't a choice, it is way of life. Today, we're traveling deep into the Himalayas to explore one of the most remote villages on Earth, Karzok. Every village has a reason for being where it is. Some were built beside rivers that could sustain life. Others grew on fertile land where farming was possible, while many flourished because they stood along ancient trade routes. When you look at Karzok, none of those reasons seem to make sense. At first glance, it feels like the kind of place people would pass through, not the place they would choose to stay. That was exactly what made us curious. Before we begin, I have a small request. Around 85 to 90% of my viewers watch these documentaries on TV, where subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment isn't always easy. Please subscribe to the Sama Shakya channel. Your support helps me create more documentaries like this. Now, let's begin. Over the past few months, our journey through Ladakh had taken us to Leh, Pangong Lake, and across the Changthang Plateau with the Changpa nomads. But every journey left one question unanswered. If life across this plateau is already so difficult, why did an entire community choose to build a permanent village here instead of somewhere easier? To find the answer, we returned to the Changthang Plateau. As we left Leh behind, the landscape slowly began to change. Traffic disappeared. Villages became fewer. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, and before long, even the mobile signal was gone. It felt as though we weren't simply traveling farther from the city. We were traveling away from everything familiar. Hours later, the deep blue waters of Somariri finally appeared. Standing quietly along its western shore was the village that had brought us all this way, Karzok. From a distance, it looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. But we would soon learn that life here has never been as gentle as the landscape first makes it appear.
People think these mountains are too harsh to live in. We don't fight the mountain. We learn how to live with it.
Standing there, it became clear that he wasn't describing the mountain. He was describing a way of life. Over the next few days, we began noticing something unusual. Nothing in Karzok seemed accidental. Every house stood where it did for a reason. Every path had been walked for generations. Even the smallest daily habits reflected years of learning how to survive in a place where nature has always set the rules.
Winter here is so harsh that simply staying alive becomes a challenge.
Leaving Leh doesn't feel unusual at first. The road follows the familiar valleys of Ladakh before climbing into the vast Changthang Plateau, home to the nomadic Changpa. With every kilometer, the road strips something away. The farther we drove into Changthang, the more the landscape revealed itself. Endless grasslands stretched beneath snow-covered peaks, interrupted only by herds of yaks and Changthangi Pashmina goats grazing across the plateau.
ये पूरा पश्मीना है।
हाँ जी, पूरा प्योर पश्मीना है सर।
कैंची से काटा तो वो पश्मीना नहीं, ऐसा निकालने वाला पश्मीना है।
हाँ, उसको राल बोलते हैं सर।
हाँ।
Ral.
With every passing kilometer, signs of human life fade away. Vehicles become rare. Settlements disappear. Soon, the silence isn't created by the absence of sound, but by the absence of everything that usually surrounds daily life. Occasionally, a herd of yaks or Pashmina goats breaks the emptiness. Then, without warning, a flash of deep blue appears between the mountains. A brilliant blue lake appears between the mountains. Tso Mariri, one of the world's highest freshwater lakes. Unlike Pangong Lake, which has become famous across Ladakh, Tso Mariri remains remarkably untouched. Its isolation has protected rare wildlife, fragile wetlands, and the centuries-old community living beside it. On its western shore stands Karzok, just a small cluster of stone and mud houses. Yet behind these walls lies one of the highest permanently inhabited villages in India, a place where survival has been shaped by altitude, isolation, and generations of experience. The lake may be what brings people here, but it isn't what explains Karzok. That story belongs to the people who chose to stay.
Everything we store in summer keeps us alive in winter.
That preparation is visible everywhere. Long before snow reaches the plateau, rooftops begin filling with fuel, food, and supplies. Every family knows that once winter closes the roads, whatever has been stored is all they will have for months. The first surprise about Karzok isn't how remote it is. Whitewashed houses stand quietly beside the lake. Prayer flags flutter above rooftops. Narrow lanes weave between stone walls, while children laugh and play as if this were any other Himalayan village. Nothing here exists for decoration. The thick stone walls keep warmth from escaping. The dung drying on rooftops will heat homes through winter. Even the narrow lanes help shield the village from icy winds. Every Dekbijan has been shaped by generations of experience. At nearly 15,000 feet, every winter tests the village, and every family prepares long before the first snowfall arrives. The beauty of Karzok isn't found in the landscape alone. It's found in the people who learn to belong here. Every wall, every rooftop, and every narrow lane reflects generations of adapting to life at nearly 15,000 feet. That connection explains why many Changpa chose to settle here, while others continued moving across the plateau. Life became permanent, but the relationship with the land never changed. Long before visitors began arriving at Tso Mariri, Karzok was already home to families whose lives were deeply connected to the Changtang Plateau. While many Changpa still migrate across the plateau with their herds, some eventually settled beside the lake, creating a permanent village without abandoning the traditions that had sustained them for generations. That connection to the land is visible everywhere. Each morning, yaks, sheep, and the famous Changthangi Pashmina goats leave the village for nearby pastures. Their exceptionally fine wool is among the most valuable natural fibers in the world and provides many families with their primary source of income. These animals provide almost everything a family needs: milk, butter, wool, transport, and even fuel. Nothing is wasted. Homes follow the same philosophy. Built from stone and mud, their thick walls hold warmth against the freezing winds, while rooftops become storage spaces for fuel and winter supplies. Looking across the rooftops, it's impossible not to notice how much of life here is spent preparing for a season that hasn't even arrived yet. In Karzok, winter is never a surprise. It's a season people spend half the year preparing for.
For us, this isn't difficult. It's simply the life we grew up with.
Perhaps that's what makes Karzok so remarkable. Most people see a remote village beside a beautiful lake. The people who live here see something entirely different. They see home, and every new day begins with earning the right to stay. By the time the first light reaches Karzok, the village is already awake, as breakfast is prepared. Here, a clear morning can turn into snow or fierce winds within hours, so the day always begins by watching the sky. Before long, the narrow lanes fill with movement. Herders lead yaks, sheep, and Changthangi Pashmina goats towards the surrounding pastures, while children set off for school. Every member of the family has a role. and the rhythm of the village has changed little over the generations. Walking through Karzok, one detail appears again and again. The rooftops, neatly stacked rows of dried yak dung, cover almost every one of them. To a visitor, it may seem unusual. For the people who live here, it's one of the most important preparations of the year. If we don't prepare now, winter will prepare us. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. At nearly 15,000 feet, very few trees grow on the Changthang Plateau, making firewood scarce. Long before the first snow falls, families spend weeks collecting, drying, and storing yak dung, knowing it will become the main source of heat through the long winter months. The work may happen in summer, but its purpose belongs to a season still far away. That is how life in Karzok has always worked. Around here, today's work is meant for a winter that may still be months away. By now, another part of Karzok begins to make sense. This wasn't simply a village built beside Tso Mariri. For generations, it has been a place where the Changpa have returned, no matter how far their seasonal journeys across the Changthang Plateau have taken them. Many Changpa families spend much of the year moving with their yaks, sheep, and Changthangi Pashmina goats, following the grasslands from one grazing ground to another. But season after season, many of those journeys lead back to the same place. Watching over the village is the centuries-old Karzok Monastery. Standing above the shores of Tso Mariri, it has witnessed generations of Changpa families come and go. For the people here, it has never been simply a place of worship. It is where children receive blessings, where families pray before leaving for distant grazing grounds, and where they return to give thanks after another season on the plateau. Once every summer, the silence surrounding the monastery disappears.
The Karzok Gustor Festival brings Changpa families together from across the Changthang Plateau. Monks, dressed in elaborate masks, perform sacred cham dances, while the sound of long ceremonial horns echoes through the valley. Families separated for months meet again beneath the monastery walls, sharing news, prayers, food, and stories before returning to their lives on the plateau. For a few days, the village feels completely different. The quiet lanes fill with people. The monastery courtyard comes alive. The empty grasslands surrounding Tso Mariri become a meeting place for an entire community. Then, as the festival ends, everyone leaves once again. The plateau grows quiet. The monastery watches over the village, and Karzok returns to the slow rhythm that has shaped life here for centuries. The festival eventually comes to an end. Families return to their grazing grounds, visitors leave. Once again, Karzok becomes a quiet village beside Tso Mariri. But the people here know something else is approaching. Winter. By the end of October, the grasslands begin losing their color. Thin sheets of ice spread across the edges of Tso Mariri, and each passing day brings colder winds sweeping across the plateau. Before long, snow begins covering the same paths that only weeks earlier were filled with people. For most places, winter is a season. In Karzok, it becomes a way of life. The road connecting the village to the rest of Ladakh can remain blocked for days after heavy snowfall, sometimes even longer. Whatever food, fuel, and supplies families collected during the warmer months must now last until the weather allows the outside world to return. Yet the village never falls silent. Before sunrise, smoke rises once again from the stone houses. Herders step into the freezing air to feed their yaks, sheep, and Changthangi Pashmina goats. Water has to be broken from ice. Animals need constant care. Every task takes longer than it did in summer, but every task still has to be done. An elderly resident explained it without calling it hardship. Winter comes every year, so every year we prepare for it. Perhaps that is the biggest difference between the people of Karzok and those who only pass through. Visitors see an unforgiving landscape. The people who live here see another winter they already know how to face. Nothing about this season is easy, but after generations on the Changthang Plateau, endurance has become part of everyday life. Not because the mountain became kinder, but because the people never stopped adapting to it. At the beginning of this journey, there was one question. Why would anyone choose to build a permanent village in a place like this? Standing in Karzok now, that question feels very different. Because this village was never built by people looking for an easy life. It was built by people who understood this land well enough to live with it. Generation after generation, they learned when the grass would disappear, how much food a family would need before the first snowfall, where to shelter their animals from the winter winds, and how to survive months of isolation without expecting the mountain to become easier. That knowledge became something far more valuable than any road or modern convenience. It became inheritance. Every stone house in Karzok stands because someone before knew how to build it. Every rooftop, stacked with fuel, reflects experience earned through countless winters. Every trail across the plateau has been walked by people who understood that survival here depends less on strength than on remembering what the last generation learned. That is why Karzok still exists. Not because nature became gentler, but because its people refused to let knowledge disappear. Long after Tso Mariri, the snow-covered peaks and the vast grasslands fade from memory, that is the part of Karzok that remains. A community that has spent centuries proving that human endurance is not about conquering one of the world's harshest landscapes. It is about learning to belong to it.